My fiancée said, "After the wedding, I'm selling your car. We'll need the money." I smiled and handed her the keys, what she found parked outside the next morning. When Melissa said it, she didn't even blink. She was sitting on the arm of the couch, scrolling through her phone, her tone casual, almost lazy. "After the wedding, I'm selling your car. We'll need the money." That was it. No conversation, no asking, just a flat statement like it had already been decided. Now, here's what you need to understand. My car wasn't just a car. It was a 1968 Mustang Fastback, deep green with chrome trim, the kind of thing you don't just buy off the lot. I had been restoring it with my dad for years before he passed. It was more than metal and tires. It was one of the last things I had of him. Every dent I fixed, every bolt I tightened, every gallon of paint I laid down was tied to memories of working beside him in the garage. That car was history. So when Melissa tossed out that line, I should have been furious. I should have told her that wasn't happening, that she didn't get to decide what would happen to something that wasn't hers. But instead, I smiled. I didn't even know why at first. Maybe shock. Maybe because deep down I had already started noticing things about her. Things I kept ignoring because I was engaged and had convinced myself this was the woman I wanted to marry. But in that moment, something shifted. Instead of arguing, I pulled the keys from my pocket and held them out. She raised an eyebrow but smirked, sliding them into her purse without another word. Like she had won. That night, while she slept, I stared at the ceiling, listening to the tick of the ceiling fan, thinking about how fast everything had changed between us. When we first met, she was all smiles, all warmth, leaning into me at bars, asking about my projects, laughing when I explained how much time I spent working on that car. Back then, she called it our baby. She would bring me water while I worked in the garage, even help polish the dashboard sometimes, though she never cared much about the details. But lately, everything she said had an edge. The way she talked about the wedding was more like she was managing a business than planning a life with me. The venue, the flowers, the band, always top dollar, always framed as investments, like the marriage itself was a transaction. And now, she had moved from the wedding to my car, treating it like a pawn ticket she could cash in. I didn't sleep much that night. The next morning, when Melissa woke up, she came downstairs expecting her latte and avocado toast. She barely glanced at me as she grabbed her purse, humming to herself. Then she stepped outside to head to her yoga class. I followed her to the door, leaning on the frame, waiting. I still remember the sound she made when she saw the driveway. The Mustang was gone. In its place was another Mustang, same model, same green paint, but this one was a wreck. Rust eating through the hood, tires flat, windshield cracked straight across. It looked like it had been fished out of a junkyard. Melissa froze, phone halfway out of her purse, her mouth open. She spun around to look at me, eyes wide, confused, furious all at once. "What the hell is this?" I didn't answer. I just watched her, calm, like I hadn't slept half the night planning this. Because what she didn't know was that the real Mustang, my Mustang, wasn't gone. I had moved it to a storage unit across town after handing her the keys. I had bought the wreck off a guy I knew from a salvage yard, paid cash, had it dropped off by a flatbed in the middle of the night. I swapped them while she was asleep. It wasn't just a prank. It was a test. Melissa didn't even try to touch the car. She stood there on the driveway, her manicured nails clutching her phone, jaw clenched so hard I could see the muscle twitch in her cheek. "This isn't funny," she snapped finally. "Where's the real one?" I shrugged. "You said you were selling it. Figured I'd make it easier for you." She didn't laugh. She stormed back inside, heels clicking against the tile, muttering under her breath. I stayed in the doorway, watching her pace, calling her brother, then her best friend, voice shrill, throwing words like psycho and unstable into the air loud enough for me to hear. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I just let her panic. And as I sat at the kitchen table, sipping my coffee, I realized something. The car was just the beginning. The rest of that week was chaos. Melissa refused to talk to me directly, instead calling her mother, who called me, demanding to know why I was playing games with her daughter. I told her calmly that everything was fine, that Melissa just misunderstood, but that wasn't enough. Melissa started telling our mutual friends that I had some kind of anger problem, that I was acting out because I was afraid of commitment. The irony made me laugh, but not out loud, because if anyone was showing their true colors, it wasn't me. That Friday, Melissa threw a dinner at our place for a few friends. She strutted around the kitchen, pouring wine, smiling like nothing had happened. She even kissed me on the cheek when she handed me a plate, but her grip on my shoulder was tight, almost bruising. Halfway through the night, one of her friends brought up the car. "So, Melissa," her friend giggled, "are you still planning on selling Nick's baby after the wedding?" Everyone laughed. Melissa laughed too, tossing her hair back. "Of course. What do we need a toy like that for?" We'll put the money into the honeymoon fund. They all laughed again, but this time I didn't even smile. I just watched her, watched the way her eyes darted to me, checking my reaction. She wanted me to look weak in front of them, to accept it, to let her rewrite the story. Instead, I stood, excused myself, and walked to the garage. The wrecked Mustang sat there under the harsh fluorescent light. I ran my hand over the rust, felt the jagged edges of the broken metal. Then I closed the door and went back inside, my face unreadable. Melissa thought she was in control. She thought the wedding gave her leverage, that her friends' laughter gave her power. But the truth was, every move she made was tightening the rope around her own neck. I didn't need to argue. I didn't need to yell. All I had to do was wait. Because Melissa had made one fatal mistake. She thought she could treat me like a fool, like a paycheck with a ring attached. And the moment she said she would sell that car, the one thing I swore I would never let anyone touch, she gave me all the reason I needed to end the game. The car was just the beginning. Melissa didn't drop the car issue. She couldn't. Every day after that morning with the wrecked Mustang, she circled back to it. Sometimes directly, sometimes sideways. At breakfast, she'd throw out casual lines about how some people just don't understand investments. On the phone with her friends, she'd laugh about how men cling to toys like toddlers. And always, when she said these things, she made sure I was close enough to hear. The thing is, I let her talk. I didn't stop her. I wanted her to believe I was folding, that I was too stunned or too weak to fight back. But in the background, I had already started digging. It began small. I knew Melissa had a credit card. She used it to book hair appointments, clothes, brunches. She always brushed it off when I asked about the balances. "Don't worry, babe. I've got it covered," she'd say, waving a manicured hand. But when we started planning the wedding, she pushed hard for us to merge accounts. She framed it like it was practical, like we'd be a team if all the money went into one pot. Something about that had felt wrong at the time. Now I knew why. One Tuesday morning, while Melissa was showering, her purse sat open on the counter. The zipper half down, the wallet practically staring at me. I never considered myself a snoop, but I pulled it out. Inside were 3 credit cards. Not 1, 3. I snapped photos of them and slid everything back exactly how it was. That evening, when she went to Pilates, I called the banks, posing as her fiancé with questions about joint accounts. Each one, in different words, confirmed what I had suspected. Melissa was drowning. The balances were staggering. 10,000 here, 8,000 there, another 6 grand hanging on the 3rd card. And late fees. Missed payments. She wasn't covering it. She was keeping herself afloat with minimums, waiting for a bigger fish to come along and bail her out. That fish was supposed to be me. I didn't confront her right away. I wanted to know more. I started pulling her mail from the box before she got to it, sliding the important envelopes under my desk in the garage, then slipping them back once I had copied the information. I learned that she had taken out a personal loan 6 months earlier, claiming it was for business expenses. The paperwork was sloppy, the numbers didn't line up. Then I saw something that stopped me cold. One of the applications had my name on it. Not just as an emergency contact, as a co-signer. Except I hadn't signed anything. Melissa had forged my signature. I sat at the desk that night staring at the crooked version of my own name scrawled across the bottom of a loan agreement. My stomach turned. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was awake. Suddenly, every strange detail over the past year made sense. The sudden insistence on a big wedding. The obsession with merging finances. The way she dismissed my Mustang as if it were nothing. She didn't see me. She saw the things she thought she could take. That weekend, she staged another scene. She invited a group of our mutual friends over for drinks. By the second glass of wine, she was performing, complaining about how stressful it was to plan a wedding when your partner can't make decisions, rolling her eyes when I didn't jump to agree with every suggestion, laughing about Nick's silly obsession with that car. Everyone chuckled along, but I caught the sidelong glances. A couple of my friends weren't laughing. They looked uncomfortable, shifting in their seats. And that's when Melissa pushed it further. She clinked her glass and said loudly, "Well, at least after the wedding, we'll have some money to work with. That car is going to cover the down payment on a real house." The room went quiet. For a beat, everyone waited for me to react. I just smiled. "Of course. Anything for you." Her friends laughed again, but this time uneasily. Later that night, when everyone had gone, Melissa confronted me. She was slurring, half-drunk, pacing the living room. "You embarrassed me," she snapped. "You just sat there like some mute while I had to carry the whole evening. Do you want people thinking you're spineless?" I let her rant. I didn't say a word. Because she didn't know I had already met with a lawyer earlier that week. A quiet guy named Harris who wore cheap suits but had a shark's eyes. He looked over the forged loan paperwork, tapped the edge of the desk, and said one word: fraud. He explained the options. If I wanted, we could bring charges immediately. But he suggested waiting. If she's this bold, he said, she'll hang herself. Let her think you're not paying attention. The more she digs, the easier it'll be to bury her. I walked out of his office with a folder of copies and a new kind of calm in my chest. For the first time, I wasn't just reacting. I was playing the long game. Melissa grew reckless. Maybe it was the stress of the wedding. Maybe it was the pressure from her creditors. But within weeks, she started making mistakes. She called me at work one afternoon to ask if I could wire a quick $500 to her account because her card was acting up. Another day, she hinted that maybe I should just give her access to my savings account so she could take some pressure off my plate. Each time, I smiled and agreed to think about it. Each time, I did nothing. Then came the public blow-up. We were at her parents' house for Sunday dinner, the kind of stiff gathering where her mother wore pearls and her father drank bourbon neat. Halfway through, Melissa launched into her usual monologue about wedding stress. Only this time, she turned to me. "You know what Nick said?" She laughed, turning to her father. "He said maybe we should cut the guest list to save money. Can you imagine? He thinks people won't notice if we cheap out." Her father frowned, muttered something about standards. Her mother tooted, clearly annoyed. Melissa leaned back, triumphant. I said nothing. But when dessert came, I excused myself and stepped outside for air. Melissa followed, smug, ready to twist the knife. "You have to learn to play along," she said. "They need to see you as someone who can provide, not some garage rat clinging to an old car." That was the moment I stopped seeing her as a fiancée. She was something else now, a rival, an opponent, someone who had drawn her line in the sand. And that's when I decided she wouldn't just lose the car. She would lose everything she thought she had gained. The first Rehearsal crack appeared at the rehearsal dinner 2 weeks later. Her brother, Ryan, had too much to drink. He stumbled through a speech, glass in hand, slurring about how Melissa always knew how to land on her feet, and how she had told him Nick's wallet was her safety net. The room went still. Melissa laughed too loud, trying to wave it off, but the words hung in the air. I caught her father's expression tighten, her mother's eyes narrow. Melissa glared at Ryan, but he was too drunk to notice. He kept rambling until someone cut him off with a toast. I stayed quiet, but inside, I knew the timing was perfect. People were starting to see. The mask was slipping. That night, while Melissa slept, I pulled the folder from my drawer. Inside were the copies of her debts, the forged loan application, the bank statements. Evidence stacked like cards, waiting to topple. I added one more page. The prenup Harris had drawn up, ironclad, airtight, with clauses that protected everything I had built. It was ready. Melissa had no idea that the very thing she thought was her future, the wedding, was about to become her undoing. The rehearsal dinner should have been a celebration. At least, that's what Melissa kept saying. She wanted everyone there, her family, her bridal party, a few friends of mine, though mostly people she wanted to impress. The restaurant was upscale, a place with low lighting, white tablecloths, and a wine list thicker than the Bible. She had picked it, of course. I walked in with the folder tucked under my arm. To anyone else, it looked like a notebook. To me, it was a weapon. Melissa was radiant that night, I'll give her that. Hair pinned perfectly, white dress clinging just right, smile wide enough to light the room. She kissed me on the cheek when I arrived, whispering in my ear, "Don't screw this up." I smiled back. Dinner started smoothly. People clinked glasses, swapped stories, ordered too much food. Melissa floated from table to table, laughing a little too loudly, making sure every eye stayed on her. I stayed in the background, nodding, listening, keeping my own glass of bourbon full but untouched. It was Ryan, her brother, who cracked things open again. He had already embarrassed her once at the smaller gathering, and tonight he was 3 drinks in before appetizers arrived. His cheeks flushed, his tie loosened. He leaned across the table and said loudly enough for half the room to hear, "You guys know she told me Nick's just her safety net, right?" "Huh," said it herself. The room froze. Again, Melissa's face drained, then flushed red. "Ryan, shut up." She laughed weakly, glancing around like it was a joke. "He doesn't know what he's saying." But Ryan didn't stop. He raised his glass. "She said she was marrying you for stability, man. Not love. Stability." Murmurs rippled. A couple guests shifted uncomfortably. Melissa's parents stiffened. That was the moment I chose. I stood, calm, folder in hand. The scrape of my chair cut through the noise. Every eye turned to me. Melissa's nervous laugh faltered. "I wasn't planning to do this tonight," I said evenly. "But since the topic keeps coming up." I set the folder on the table, flipping it open. Inside, neatly arranged, were copies of her debts, the loan applications, the forged signature. At the top, the prenup Harris had drawn up, printed on heavy paper with my signature already in place. "Melissa," I said, sliding the papers toward her, "I think it's time everyone sees the truth." Gasps rose. Her father leaned forward, adjusting his glasses. Her mother's lips parted in shock. Friends craned their necks to read. Melissa's hands shook as she snatched the papers, rifling through them. This is private, she snapped, her voice trembling. Not when my name is forged on a loan, I replied, still calm. Not when you've been lying about debts. Not when you've been planning to sell everything I own as if it belongs to you. The room buzzed. Whispers, shocked faces, muttered curses. Melissa's father slammed his hand on the table. Is this true? He barked at her. She stammered, flipping through the documents. It's exaggerated. He's twisting things. I leaned forward. It's not exaggerated. These are exact copies. If anyone doubts it, they can check with the bank. Ryan, suddenly sober, muttered, damn. Melissa's mother covered her mouth. Melissa, how could you? Stop. Melissa shouted, her voice shrill, echoing through the restaurant. You're humiliating me. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. No, you humiliated yourself. I'm just showing them what was already true. She looked around desperately, searching for someone to defend her. No one moved. The silence was heavy, suffocating. Finally, I tapped the prenup on the table. You still have a choice. You can sign this, tonight, and we move forward with the wedding. Or you can walk away, and I take this evidence to the police first thing tomorrow. Melissa's lips quivered. She stared at the paper, then at me, then at the guests. Her friends avoided her eyes. Her parents looked like they wanted to disappear into the floor. She tried to laugh again, but it cracked. This is some kind of test, right? You wouldn't really. I didn't blink. It's not a test. The silence stretched. Then, slowly, Melissa slid the papers back across the table without signing. Her hand shook so badly the folder nearly slipped. I'm not signing anything, she whispered. And with that, the rehearsal dinner ended. The fallout was immediate. The next morning, I woke up to 20 missed calls from her. By noon, I had another 15 from her mother. I ignored them all. Instead, I drove to the courthouse with Harris. He filed the paperwork I had prepared weeks earlier. Fraud charges. Official. By the time I got home, a sheriff's deputy was already there, sliding a summons into the mailbox. Melissa stood on the porch, hair wild, eyes red from crying. She grabbed my arm as I walked up. Nick, please, don't do this. We can fix it. I pulled free. No, Melissa, you broke it. And now you get to live with it. Her voice rose. You'll ruin me. I looked her dead in the eye. No, you ruined yourself. I just stopped covering it up. She screamed after me as I walked inside, pounding on the door, but I didn't open it. That night, word spread. My friends texted, stunned at what had happened. Even a couple of her bridesmaids reached out, admitting they'd suspected something was off but hadn't wanted to get involved. Melissa tried to spin it online. She posted a vague message about toxic relationships and betrayal, but screenshots of the forged loan paperwork had already started circulating. Harris knew people in the clerk's office, and it didn't take long for the documents to hit the local gossip mill. By the time the actual wedding day rolled around, Melissa was radioactive. The morning of the wedding, I dressed calmly, not in a tux, but in a suit I'd picked for court. My groomsmen knew. They met me at my apartment, all grim but supportive. Melissa, meanwhile, woke up at her parents' house to the sound of a courier knocking at the door. He handed her a thick envelope, the official summons, stamped and signed. Her father read it in silence. Her mother started crying. Guests began arriving at the church expecting a ceremony. Instead, they found whispers, chaos, bridesmaids crying in the vestibule. Melissa locked herself in a room, refusing to come out. I didn't show up at the church. I was at the courthouse instead, filing the last pieces of paperwork with Harris. By noon, Melissa was officially under investigation. By evening, the wedding venue had been canceled, the deposit, paid under my name, already in the process of being refunded. The honeymoon reservations? Gone. The lease on the dream apartment she had picked out? Voided. Every plan she had built on the assumption that I was her golden ticket collapsed in a single day. And the best part? I hadn't raised my voice once. What Melissa didn't know, what no one knew yet, was that the Mustang was still safe. She thought I had destroyed it or sold it behind her back. She told anyone who would listen that I had lost my mind and wrecked it out of spite. But the truth was sitting in a climate-controlled garage 2 towns over, polished to a mirror shine, engine purring like it was brand new. The wreck she had seen in the driveway was nothing but a decoy. A shell I had picked up for a few $100s. A symbol of what she thought she could do, strip me down, take what she wanted, leave me with nothing. Except now, she was the one stripped bare. The days after were a blur of fallout. Melissa tried to call me, begged for meetings, even showed up at my apartment once pounding on the door until the neighbors threatened to call the cops. She alternated between sobbing apologies and furious threats. But it didn't matter anymore. The process had started, and for the first time in a long time, I felt in control. The wedding hadn't just been canceled. It had been transformed from a stage where she planned to show off her perfect life into a trial where everyone saw her for who she really was. And that was just the beginning of her fall. I thought the courthouse would be the end of it. File the paperwork, cut ties, let her deal with the wreckage she'd created. But Melissa wasn't the type to bow out quietly. The morning after the wedding that never happened, I woke to pounding on my apartment door. Through the peephole, I saw her, hair tangled, makeup smeared, barefoot, screaming my name. "Nick, you can't do this to me. You can't ruin my life over a stupid car." Her fists hammered the door. Neighbors peeked out from down the hall. I let her scream until her voice cracked, then watched her collapse against the frame, sobbing. Eventually, she slid down the wall, curled on the floor, muttering to herself. When the police arrived, called in by one of the tenants, she tried to spin it. Told them I was abusive, that I had locked her out after stealing her property. The officers, calm but clearly tired of the theatrics, asked for proof. She had none. I handed them a folder of my own, documents from Harris, copies of the fraud filings. The cops took one look at the paperwork and asked Melissa to leave. She refused, so they walked her out. She kicked at the doorframe as they dragged her away, shrieking that I'd regret this. That was the last time she came to my apartment. But the real war was just beginning. Melissa tried to salvage her image. She flooded social media with posts about surviving betrayal, about how I had gaslit her and ruined her dreams. She even staged photos with friends, wine glasses in hand, captioning them with lines about new beginnings. But the internet doesn't forget. Within a week, screenshots of the forged loan application were circulating, courtesy of someone in the clerk's office. A local gossip blog ran the headline, "Bride-to-be under investigation for fraud, wedding called off at altar." The comments were brutal. Her job, a marketing position at a boutique firm, let her go. Not officially because of the scandal, but because her name had become toxic. Clients didn't want to be associated with her. Her parents, humiliated at the rehearsal dinner and furious about the investigation, cut her off financially. Her father's exact words, I later heard through the grapevine. "You've embarrassed this family enough. You're on your own." Melissa moved out of their house and into a dingy apartment across town. She tried calling me again, this time softer, pleading for just one conversation. I ignored every message. I wasn't cruel. I didn't send her screenshots, didn't rub it in. I didn't have to. Life was doing that for me. Meanwhile, the Mustang sat untouched in its storage unit, gleaming under fluorescent lights. Every few days I drive over, open the door, and run my hand across the hood. The car had become more than a memory of my dad. It was a reminder that Melissa never really knew me at all. She thought she could strip me of the one thing I valued most, sell it off like scrap metal, and walk away richer. Instead, the car was the one thing she never got close to touching. I had already decided what I would do with it. But first, I wanted to make sure Melissa understood. 2 months into the investigation, Melissa finally cracked. She showed up at Harris's office, demanding to clear things up. Harris called me afterward, amused. She begged Nick, said she didn't mean to forge the signature, that it was a misunderstanding, that she thought you'd be fine with it. Then she asked if we could just drop the charges. And I asked. Harris laughed. And I told her we don't get to decide that anymore. The state's handling it. Melissa left his office in tears. A week later, she tried a new angle. She sent me a long email, paragraphs about how she had made mistakes, how she still loved me, how we could move past this if we just started fresh. At the bottom was a single line. "I know where you keep the car. Please, let's talk about it before I do something stupid." My blood ran cold. I drove straight to the storage unit. The Mustang was fine, untouched. But I didn't take chances. I moved it to a private garage a friend owned, secured behind cameras and alarms. Melissa had wanted me to panic. But all she did was confirm what I already knew. Even at rock bottom, she still thought the car was her ticket out. The trial came faster than I expected. Fraud cases can drag on, but the evidence was overwhelming. Harris presented the forged documents, the bank records, even testimony from a notary who remembered Melissa rushing through the paperwork. Melissa tried to play the victim in court, crying on the stand, talking about stress and wedding pressure. The judge wasn't moved. She was sentenced to 18 months probation, heavy fines, and mandatory financial counseling. No prison time, first offense, but her reputation was shredded. I sat in the back of the courtroom, watching her crumble. She avoided my eyes. For the first time, she didn't look angry. She just looked small. When it was over, I walked out without a word. Months passed. I rebuilt my life quietly. Friends who had distanced themselves during the chaos came back around. My job was steady, my evenings were calm, and the Mustang became my therapy. I decided to enter it in a local car show, something I'd always wanted to do with my dad, but never had the chance. The night before, I polished it until my reflection gleamed in the paint. At the show, people crowded around, admiring the restoration, asking questions, snapping photos. I felt proud, not just of the car, but of surviving the storm Melissa had tried to drag me through. As I was leaving, I spotted her. Melissa stood across the street, thin, pale, clutching a worn purse. Her hair was darker now, her clothes cheaper, her shoulders hunched. She was staring at the Mustang like it was oxygen. For a second, our eyes met. She looked like she wanted to say something, to scream, to cry, to beg. But no words came. She just stared, trembling, then turned and walked away. I didn't follow. I slid into the driver's seat, turned the key, and let the engine roar. The sound filled the lot, filled my chest. I drove off, leaving her behind for good. The final irony was this. Melissa had tried to sell my car for money she thought she needed. But in the end, it was her life that got stripped and sold off. Her friends, her job, her family's respect, even her own name in the community, all gone. And the Mustang? Still mine. Untouchable. The last time I saw Melissa was 6 months later, outside a grocery store. She was carrying bags in the rain, no umbrella, hair plastered to her face. She didn't notice me in the car. Or maybe she did, and just didn't want to meet my eyes. I sat there for a moment, watching her struggle, then drove away. Not out of spite, not out of pity, just because there was nothing left between us anymore. Her story ended where she thought mine would. And mine was just getting started again. And that's the story. If you're still here, that means you're one of us. So go ahead, hit that subscribe button. I drop new chaos every single day, and trust me, tomorrow's story, it's even worse than this one.